Britain has come a long way. The man who once gave us broken Brexit is now leading the polls to become the next Prime Minister. No, it's not Boris Johnson, although he wishes. It's Nigel Farage, a man who has been inescapable from British politics for the last 15 years. He was once an outsider, a castaway of British politics, always on the fringe. But now we're realising that his career has started to outlast many of the rivals who laughed at him. Nigel Farage's party, Reform, now lead in some polls, and in nearly all polls lead the Conservative Party, who were supposed to be the official opposition. And this is despite the fact that Nigel Farage's party only has as many MPs as you can count on one hand. But it's not just about MPs. In the last election, Nigel Farage's party actually did pretty well. And it's, well, think about Hillary Clinton in the US election 2016. A popular vote, but didn't get so far in the actual election. So Nigel Farage's influence is hardly an overnight success. It is a slow, gradual thing. But what happened? Has Britain become more racist? No, the answer is more complex. Reform these days is less about kicking out migrants and more about kicking out the elite. Farage talks about ripping up red tape and disposing of the old ways. Many voters see Nigel Farage as a man who's not afraid to take risks in order to change the status quo. And it's a winning formula right now. This is not just a British thing, it's a global phenomenon. Argentina's leader Milei famously took a chainsaw to the economy, and even though his critics warned it would be dangerous, it has so far had some good results. Likewise, many economists were worried about Trump's trade wars. They thought the economy would crash, but actually the stock market's held up fairly well so far. I'm from the UK, and while I may not necessarily support Nigel Farage, there is an inescapable feeling that change is needed. If you're in London, you can spend over £1,000 just to get a shoddy shoebox room with a sink, if you're lucky. You know, back when I was a kid, the idea of having £1 million was like worthy of a game show. Now having £1 million actually wouldn't get you very far in London. And I suspect that people are tired. In 2010, when the Conservative government came along in Britain under the guise of a coalition, there was talk of credit crunch and austerity and buckling down in order to have a brighter tomorrow. But when tomorrow came, it was just as dark and poor as ever. And by the time the Conservatives left office in 2024, the economy was worse. And then the opposition party came along, the Labour Party, which we have at the moment, and they promised change, and we really did need change in Britain. But then they came and won and said, actually, there's a bigger financial problem than we realised, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna raise your taxes. Many videos on YouTube from Brits also talk about this desire for change. My algorithm now fills up with digital nomads going to Southeast Asia and having mansions with swimming pools. I myself have spent some time in Taiwan, and you know what? They're partly right. You can live a good life if you're willing to ignore the earthquakes and typhoons. You know, Britain is, for the most part, a politically centre-right leaning country. Keir Starmer was barely left when he first came into power, and Labour's last big celebrity winner, Tony Blair, was, yes, he was left, but he only won because he managed to appeal to big businesses and the Sun newspaper. Britain rejected left-leaning heroes like Jeremy Corbyn, but didn't bat an eyelid at prime ministers who compared Muslims to postboxes. So Britain wants a change, and that change sometimes can trump common sense. Nigel Farage is no Donald Trump, and the UK is no USA. Nigel Farage's ability to cut the red tape and demolish bureaucracy would be harder than he thinks. Or maybe he knows that already. Britain is hundreds and hundreds of years older than the USA. It has traditions and laws so steep that even a nuclear war would not abolish it. Not that I'm advocating for it. But despite the slim chances of Nigel Farage actually managing to do something, he does have a sizable chance of winning the next election. He has transitioned, no, not like that, from hard right to something a little softer. For example, he now says that he cannot win without the Muslim vote. He wants integration rather than eradication. And whenever a Reform member does say something racist, Nigel Farage firmly steps away from it and says that's not what we're about. Nigel knows that he needs to appeal to the British centre-right soft spot. Britain is just too old for extremists. And so the hard right now have a new poster boy, Tommy Robinson, whose name is not actually Tommy Robinson and has been legally convicted for using a fake passport and name to travel. The fact that the hard right now champion a football hooligan over Nigel Farage shows that even Nigel Farage's old base are starting to think that Nigel Farage is getting a bit too soft for them. But a fringe cannot win an election. You need to appeal to the larger base, and Nigel Farage knows this. There was also outrage on Twitter where Nigel Farage was seen laughing and joking with the leader of the country, Keir Starmer. Many saw it as a betrayal or Nigel Farage schmoozing with the elites. Gasp! How dare Nigel Farage socialise like a normal politician? I want to say it again, I'm not a Nigel Farage fan, but there are signs that he is starting to soften his political position and his talk of change can be appealing to some. If Nigel Farage does win the next election, perhaps it is just destiny. Nigel Farage has survived a plane crash. He has survived cancer. He was knocked down by a car. It feels as if life is just not yet ready to get rid of him. It is almost as if fate has something big planned for him. The prospect of Nigel Farage as Prime Minister 10 years ago was laughable. Even me that covers political comedy would not have covered such an idea. Now though, Britain is tired. Britain feels like it's willing to take more of a risk. And as Nigel Farage once said to the European Parliament after delivering a Brexit win, "You all laughed at me, but I have to say, you're not laughing now."